Welcome back. You're still with us on our special Recharging Renewables. The Confederation of Indian Industry has put forward a slew of interventions that the government must focus on to get this sector back on the growth path. Let's continue our discussion with our guests. In terms of intervention, and I'll ask you because one of the specific recommendations I think the CII has also made is the fact that there should be at least a renewable purchase obligation on part of the government to try and give impetus to this sector as well. Would that be key to ensuring what Suman talked about in terms of the grid, etc., and what Rahul also said, managing the supply-demand dynamics and evening it out?
I think it's right, and I think it's still there. What you have to see is whether it is implemented or not. I think there are one other factor which Suman mentioned, and I would like to highlight it out there. It's that there are other ways. Currently the utility scale projects are getting all the optics, and the tariff is becoming the talk of the town. If you look at what India needs, we need power, we need energy, and then you have solutions like rooftops, and you have schemes like KUSUM, which also helps the agriculture sector, and in the same process help the farmer to export the power to. Stabilizes the grid is one part, technical part of it. I think there is a lot which is possible in the current regime on the technologies which are available, which can also be progressively in that manner. We have been overtly aggressive on the utility scale. Today we have come to a level where we are competing. But I don't think so there is a point of competition in this between fossil fuel and renewable. Both should exist, coexist, should align. And the focus towards the rooftops and the focus towards the scheme like KUSUM can be a big changer for this country. At the end of the day, if you look at what we need, when you increase the per capita consumption, these are the ways you can easily get your power.
Assuming that it continues to be capped, the tariffs, and it is at about this 2.44 per unit, which is what we're currently seeing, what can be done on the cost side to ensure that these tariffs are sustainable? I'll do a sort of quick round across the table, and Sumant, I'll start by asking you, what can be done on the cost side, whether it's taxes, GST, we talked about inputs going up, the rupee depreciation, of course, it's now started to appreciate again, but what can be done on the cost side?
Well, first of all, the price cap by itself is fine, provided you have a proper price cap, right? If the price cap is very low, then that's the problem. So, and the issue is that...
So 2.44 is too low?
So 2.44 was not the price cap. The price cap was a little bit higher than that, but it was still very low. And the issue is that if you keep it very close to where the market clearing price might end up being, then you'll always have a situation where some people will not be able to bid because it's too aggressive for them. And then you're always leaving it in the hands of people who are not operating in the markets on a day-to-day basis to determine what that tariff should be.
And that
rather than letting the competitive auction process determine what the right tariff, the market clearing tariff should be.
And it's being determined then, I would imagine, from what you're saying, is by risky capital, so to speak.
That's right. I think what ends up therefore happening is that the capital that is willing to take the most amount of risk is the only one that is willing to come in at those tariff levels. And so you end up having, instead of having a broad, sustainable amount of capital coming in, which is what is required to meet these huge targets, where we need all sorts of capital, whether it's institutional investors, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, private equity funds, domestic and international, all coming into the sector. Instead of that, you just end up having that capital which is driven by people or owned by people who are willing to take the most amount of risk. And at some point, those risks don't necessarily go in your favor all the time. Sometimes they may not go in your favor.
And then it becomes a problem with the banks.
Exactly. So then it ends up being a situation where banks are left holding the can. And so that's why that's not the kind of behavior that the government should really be incentivizing and pushing for. But that is unfortunately what ends up happening if you keep price caps which are very close to where the actual market clearing price might be. Because you may get it wrong, right? Because the market is a dynamic situation. Interest rates change. So to come back to address your question, what can be done? The biggest issue by far is interest rates. Those have the biggest impact on our
I don't think the government can control that.
No, but they can't control that, obviously. But what they can look at doing is, giving us some kind of schemes where, let's say there's some sort of FX hedging mechanism, which the previous minister had talked about and tried to put in place. If you're able to borrow in dollars, for example, not have to hedge it fully, hedge it only partially, that will allow us to bring the cost down substantially. So those kinds of interventions are certainly possible. And then, of course, there are interventions on the capital equipment side, which goes towards taxes and so on, the government can decide that this is a priority sector, and therefore we need to bring taxes down to 0 on this sector instead of 5 or 18% where it is right now. It's a little bit unclear in some cases. So those kinds of interventions are possible as well to overall bring the cost down. But to my mind, tariffs are already fairly low. So that's not where the problem lies, actually. The problem is to get acceptability on the part of the discoms. And I think that is where you need to have enforcement of renewable purchase obligation targets, because that is how the sector really got to this point. So for us now to take our foot off the gas as far as RPO is concerned, even though tariffs are at 250 or 270 or wherever they are, sub 3 rupees for sure, I think that's really going down the wrong path.
Okay, yeah.
Just to add to both of Suman's points, one question is, how do you make the tariffs lower? Second question is that even at these tariffs, how do you get discoms to buy more actively? I think those are the two questions.
And why isn't that happening? If tariffs are this low, why do we actually not have discoms buying, and why do we not have the enforcement of the RPO then?
So just the first point, I think if you look at India's energy bill, 70% of India's energy bill is already exposed to the dollar. Now you're slowly substituting that energy bill, which is crude oil and fossil fuel and gas, with electricity. So if you're used to being exposed to the dollar, what is the harm, for example, to have some dollar PPAs, like the way Sumant is saying, and just encourage the sector? By the way, dollar PPAs, you could look at maybe a 30% reduction in the tariffs. That's what's happening in the US at the moment. So that could be one solution. Coming back to your question about why aren't discoms finding this price attractive? I think the real issue is that this power that's available, let's say solar power, is available 6 to 8 hours a day. They then have to add to that 2 rupees 60 paisa, 1.5, 2 rupees, 3 rupees of capacity charge that they have to pay to either their own thermal gencos or to NTPC or to some other gencos, right? So I think altogether they're saying this is 5-6 rupees. And by the way, I'm already making a net loss on my every unit that I sell to my consumer because of the heavy theft of 30-40%. Recently, you saw that the states that have implemented highest rural electrification and household electrification are also the same states where the theft has gone up. This is a serious problem in our country. Till we don't fix this, you're not going to fix anything. So coming back to the point, can the government create an incentive system to now drive firm renewable power? Can we really incentivize huge amounts of energy battery storage to go along with the power and say, can we get firm electric power, if not at 240, maybe at 350? That perhaps is more palatable to discoms to support all the incremental demand as opposed to 240 for just 6 hours in a day.
Okay. So, Ashish, I'm going to give each one of you the final comments now. Priorities and what would your chief concern be today for the health of this sector?
I think, first of all, let me go back to it, that when we are talking about the cost and the cost reduction, at least in this industry now, we have to look at a total cost of ownership. Look at it that plant has to work for 25 years, not on a transactional basis, whatever Excel sheets today prove as a point of returns and the debt cost of it. And I think when we will look into it, the aspect of quality will come into it. And I think that's a major factor which we have to see across these installations. If we complete 100 gigawatt, we are virtually covering one Switzerland with our modules as such. I think it is important that we talk about the quality and the cost if that quality is not being met as such. On the priority sector, I think I will again say that while looking at the quality of the products, again, like Prateek said, we are exposed now to the foreign exchange vagaries. If we have made in India, if you are looking for this sector for next 25 years as a renewable factor, a push towards the made in India, which can to a large extent can mitigate that risk of having foreign exchange vagaries out there, will be a great help to the country. It will generate employment. We will have the quality of the products which we need out there. I think that is number two.
Specifically from the Make in India perspective, what more is it that you would like to see? I mean, we've got the safeguard duties, etc., to some extent being put into place. So what exactly is it that you would like to see?
You see, if you look at today, the safeguard duty, the ground reality is not helping the manufacturer to the extent. So it was the right intent for the manufacturers, but the way the tariffs has been passed through and the way that the new bidding is happening, which is giving a window of 21 months for the project to be executed, there is very little which a developer will like to ask from the local manufacturers on that factor. So I think the intent was right. The operational wise, we have to take it off. The second intent is we have to work on the rooftops. Again, when we look at 100 gigawatt, 40 gigawatt of that was rooftops. Today we are lacking behind.
What's the deficit? What's the deficit today?
Huge. We are into 1:5 now. We have not even reached 2 to 5 gigawatt against that. And I think it's a good distributed generation. We have the technology now. We need the power out there. Let's take it forward.
Okay, Rahul?
Yes, I think to your question, we should go back to the government's vision of 175 gigawatts. Let's break down that vision into yearly plans as we had done earlier. We haven't met those plans, that's okay. Let's replan those plans. Let's actually tender out 10 gigawatts or 12 or 14 gigawatts that needs to be tendered out. Whatever impediments are there for tendering that out, let's figure that out. Who will buy the energy? Which state is going to buy the energy? You know, we need to go down to that level of detail and not for 1 year. Let's do it for a 5-year plan. The problem is we're an infrastructure industry and we're planning bid by bid. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. Let's today have visibility of what's going to happen over the next 5 years so we can arrange our funds accordingly. We can arrange the competencies needed in the country accordingly.
Funds a problem today? Accessing funds a problem today?
There's a two-part question. A lot of the debt was coming from NBFCs. So all the project finances which are supposed to close in between last month and the next 4 months will definitely see some heartburn.
Okay.
So that's definitely going to be there because NBFCs are going to go slow, and if they're going to go slow, they'll of course go slower on the renewable sector as well.
Okay, so that's a concern at this point in time.
And as far as the equity goes, I think there is more than enough equity all over the globe who's still keen to invest in India as long as India is able to deliver.
Okay, 30 seconds, Sumant, final third.
So look, I think that in general, the sector is not in a bad place. I think there are some temporary issues that have surfaced right now. I think those will be addressed because there is a fairly healthy dialogue between the corporate sector through CII and the government. And I think all of these issues that are there right now will therefore get addressed. And I think the sector will come back, perhaps not, as I said earlier, to achieve the 175 gigawatts, but will certainly make a fairly good attempt at getting close to that level. But as I said, the government really needs to broad base what they're doing, and the focus from the utility scale side should also expand much more to the distributed side, and we need to therefore see a lot more happening on many other sectors. But the DISCOM financial health, very, very critical.
Well, DISCOM financial health is a cause of key concern. Tariff caps, unfortunately, out of time. So my apologies, Pratik. Tariff caps are cause for concern. Much more needs to be done on rooftop solar. A lot more needs to be done to incentivize Make in India for the renewable energy sector. More interventions needed to try and look at the cost issue that the sector is grappling with as well. Some specific recommendations being made. Perhaps not a bad idea to revisit and rescale the targets that have been set for 2022. With that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special Recharging the Renewable Energy Sector. We'll see you again from all of us here. For now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.